So most of us just live in one world, right? A world with predictable rules, and we're pretty certain we know what can and cannot happen. And science will lead the way to better and more glorious advances of the human race, etc., etc., etc. And that world is very comfortable, and it breeds a type of anesthetic complacency, where we are given the dubious luxury of working 40 to 60 hours a week so that we don't have enough time to contemplate the nature of our spirit and our souls and our minds. And we aren't given the opportunity in that world to really delve deeply into this reality and take a peek behind the veil. But for those of us who do look past that veil, we're so lucky to get even just short glimpses of those darkly glittering lands just past where you can normally see. And sometimes something reaches out from those worlds that surround ours to introduce itself and give our reality a good hard slap in the face so that we can lose some of those walls and understandings that don't serve us any good, truly. And there's so much to gain really from finding a study or story or a magical practice or even a religion that lets us look past that veil and shake the hand that greets us. There's so much to gain from expanding your mind past what you think your normal beliefs are. So when the time comes to do that, when you feel the call of something drawing you into one of the greater mysteries, or perhaps when you encounter a denizen of one of those realms that deeply permeate and inform ours, whether it's a ghost giving you the shivers when you go down into your basement, or whether some elder thing comes wandering out of the shadows at night to redecorate your reality, so to speak. The one thing you got to do is you have to find the right source of information to learn from. And there are, in my opinion, very few sources as well informed as my guest today. Now, Jason Miller is a teacher of immense skill. He is a very compelling author, and he is a world-class sorcerer. I've followed everything that he's written for over the past decade, and it has greatly informed my life in ways that I can only accurately say are profound. And to even say that might be understating things a bit. Now, I was lucky enough to run across his work and study it, and I'm even luckier to actually have gotten an hour of his time to sit down and discuss his new book, Consorting the Spirits. We discuss magic in general and a few tips and a few gems on living magically. So for the next hour or so, I want you to sit back, relax, and enjoy. All right, Jason freaking Miller here, sorcerer extraordinaire. I don't think it's too much to say. How are you doing today, Jason?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well here in a wonderfully cloudy day, just waiting for a storm to break. I got my fingers crossed for it. But for those of us listening, I should say those who are listening, who aren't really familiar with your story, if we were to sum up the adventure that is Jason in a short span of time, what would be the best way to do that?
Oh, goodness. It's so funny because as I've gotten older, I've decided to make my bio a lot shorter, right? I deliberately decided to just stop. Oh, I was a member of this and was initiated into this and so on. So, I was a kid who started seeing spirits and odd things at an early age. It stuck with me in my teens. That led me to magic. And I had just a startlingly and weird array of teachers lined up all in central New Jersey, willing to entertain a curious teenager. And then that set me on my path. And here I am 35 years later, with my 6th book and a bunch of courses and making my living at this. So
very nice. Awesome. And it's kind of amazing to see somebody actually make a living as a practicing occultist in any way, shape, or form in this day and age. So living the dream there.
That is true.
Life goals. All right. So you teach the Black School of St. Cyprian, sorcery of Hecate, strategic sorcery. Have you got any new goodies coming out here we should know about?
Oh goodness, I've got I've got a class on Jupiter that is now in its 3rd run. Very excited about that one. I've got an arcane audio series of one-shot classes. The next one is coming up in May. It's going to be on the mechanics of magic. Sort of a necessarily incomplete and sloppy look at how all this crap works.
Okay.
Because I really distrust the supposedly complete and very tidy explanations. So yeah, I've got that coming up, and of course the new book Consorting with Spirits hitting shelves in May, and very exciting.
Very nice. And Consorting with Spirits, I'm definitely going to come back to that because I have so much interest in this. I've been kind of drooling over it since you announced it being released, I think a few months ago. But what we're really kind of looking at here, at least from this channel's point of view, I think you touched very lightly on it and it just kind of set off my radar, is the sloppiness of not necessarily, in my experience anyways, magic, but what happens to your life when magic or a spirit or a god or somebody just walks in and says hello, and how things go completely sideways at that point.
They can.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember being, when I was younger, my dad was a very bad attempt at a Christian preacher. And I came to the conclusion of the psychological model. It was all just stages of consciousness. And it was pretty fascinating. My psychology degree came in really handy there. But my very first poltergeist disabused me of that notion rather quickly.
It's amazing how you get your ass kicked by something you didn't quite believe in.
Oh, man, phew. That was definitely something. So, Consorting with Spirits. I definitely want to dive into that book as soon as possible. When we are saying spirits, that's kind of such a big catch-all term that we use, especially in the New Ager kind of crowd. What is it Jason, what does it you mean when you say spirits? Is that a classification? Is that a kind of nom de guerre? What is that?
So when I say spirits, I am talking broadly about anything that fits the definition of organized consciousness. So that means you and I are spirits, and we are. That's a big part of how magic works. We're spirits currently organized around a body as well as other things, but our physicality is one of our defining features at the moment. There are other ways for consciousness to organize itself. So in the broadest sense, it includes us. But of course, casually, when I'm talking about spirits, I am talking about entities that are not tangible. So I'm not talking about animals. I'm not talking about insects. I'm not talking about people. I'm generally talking about anything that doesn't fit that mold. Now, that could be gods, demons, angels, pixies, dryads, nature spirits, Lu, Nagas, like you name it, yakshas, Nagas, Rakshasas, anything the world over. I'm happy to just say, yeah, that's a spirit. And then we can look at how that spirit is organized and how where that spirit is oriented to, which are sort of like the two features that I think are most important to get a handle on. And it's different for every spirit. So it's it's an adventure. Things are never as neat and tidy as the books make them out to be. And unfortunately, people keep pretending that it is very neat and tidy.
Yeah, there's been so much of that, especially in the, with all due respect to them, the love and light, everything is happy crowd tend to, which I think kind of faded away as the 90s and early aughts, as the crowd, at least the group I was with, started to grow up a bit and realized not everything out there is friendly and necessarily has, happy endings in mind. But I think as we delve into the concept of spirits, I think right on the head, the very first thing you said is that it includes us. And that's something that we tend to forget we're also spirit. And I had a theory that for some reason in organized religions of multiple types, I think, tend to encourage us to forget that in order to depend on that intercessionary religious view, which
yes and no. I think most religions, Christianity is a very developed notion that, you're a spirit and a soul, and even the non-mystical Christianity, just the ordinary evangelical hoo-ha, it's all about what happens to your spirit. So I can't see they let people forget. In fact, they use it as a tool to scare the bejesus out of people.
Yeah, I think that's probably a better way of looking at it than how I was organizing that as I was kind of pulling it out of thin air. But yeah, that's definitely a good point. And the fear of what happens to your soul is always kind of interesting in the sense that, yes, we are spirit, and yes, there are other spirits. And the two of us can always, associate one way, shape, or form or another. But I think the beauty of bringing magic in is that it focuses a lot of intent on your spirit in the current, instead of waiting until you die and just kind of, hoping you got it right in your 70 to 80 years on the planet.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Definitely. Okay. So with some of the information that I was reading about the book, one of the really cool things that I saw was you're going to go more in depth with discussing how spirits exist in relationship to kind of this realm, if you want to use that term.
Yeah. So, in the book, I talk about how if you pray, right, pray to a deity, or you might get their attention. And you might even feel their presence. Maybe even if you perform, an evocation or a ritual, unless you have directed a spirit to appear in a certain place, you might feel the overall presence of that God, that angel, that big worldwide known spirit, right? Mm-hmm. So like Saint Michael, people pray all over the world to Saint Michael. And he's not like one angel quickly flapping his wings to get from one place to the next. He's oriented in such a way that he's very big, he's very wide, he's very vast, right? And so whereas a ghost or the spirit in the stream outside my house right here, they're not so widely oriented. They're much closer to the physical. If there's a haunting, typically people can point to where the ghost is.
Yeah.
When I'm out encountering nature spirits, I can usually point to where the spirit is.
Mhm.
It's not just a vast presence. And then there are ways that, so this is where orientation comes in. And then, of course, there are ways that we can use magic to force orientation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So evocations, there are a lot of records of evocations where the spirit is uncomfortable. The spirit would really like all this to be over as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so the idea is this, it's uncomfortable because you've taken this being that's fairly vast, and now you're forcing it to reorient itself down into a level where you can see it with your not quite developed psychic senses. In some cases, people aren't even concerned with developing psychic senses. They just want that fucker to appear right in the air in front of them, like it's they're watching Endgame or something, and full 4K HD. And
God, that'd make things so much easier if it would happen every time too, wouldn't it?
right, yeah. It's so that kind of thing takes an enormous amount of effort. You're breaking reality to get this to happen, and you're forcing that spirit to do something it doesn't want to do. Imagine the other way around. Like, imagine, well, we have records of the other way around. People experiencing trauma and then reorienting their mind higher into spirit, right? So they're experiencing, like Asha Sprague, who is a local spiritualist back in the 1800s. She didn't start contacting spirits until she almost died of fever. And you have people experience these things. They get triggered by accidents and so on, but sometimes they get triggered by prayer and work and desire, or sometimes they just get triggered from the other side. This is where the angel or a god just grabs a prophet and is like, you've got the ability for me to communicate something, so I'm going to rip you out of your life. And it's not comfortable. So there you go. Like, that's a good example of orientation and how we can kind of force it. Similarly, sometimes you think you're talking to a big deity or a spirit or a famous god or demon or angel or something, and what winds up working for you is actually a local spirit who is oriented closer to the physical. This is what I call the mall Santa phenomenon.
I love the mall Santa phenomenon. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's the mall Santa phenomena when kids, they go to the mall, and you don't have to be too old, like 4-year-olds, kind of like, they go to the mall and then they think, well, if Santa is supposed to be in the North Pole making toys, how is he spending all day here? And if they go to, like, if you're in New Jersey, chances are the kids go to more than one mall, and it's like, well, why does that Santa look different than the other Santa? And then they figure out, right, this guy works for Santa, so I'm just going to go up and I'm going to pretend he's Santa, and he's going to pretend he's Santa. And then at the end of the day, he's going to send his report in, and the right people will get my request. And then when I wake up on Christmas morning, I'll get my crap. So it's kind of like that. You think you're talking to Hecate, and maybe you are, but then the work winds up getting done by a Lompod, or maybe you were talking to a night nymph to begin with, or something like that. Mall Santa phenomena.
Yeah, and that is how similar or tangential to that is, let's say, Hecate or Hecate. How similar is that to the multiple forms that a goddess can appear in, for example?
So multiple forms, I suppose that it could be related to orientation, especially when those forms are regional, right? Like if the people in one region perceive a spirit one way versus another, that can be related to orientation. But in general, I tend to think of a deity's different forms as relating to what that deity is teaching or conveying. So deities that tend to have multiple forms that are purposeful, that are actually manifestations from them, they're usually meant to symbolize something or show an action or display an ability, or a mystery. And then, of course, sometimes you just have it works the other way around. These beings get portrayed by artists in a certain way, or a mystic says it looked this way, and then it gets picked up by artists and portrayed that way. And then people who, instead of starting with the vision and then talking to the artist, they're starting with the art and trying to get to the spirit. It winds up patterning their experience of that being, just as much as if I said, well, today you're probably going to meet Nicholas. Nicholas is a nice guy, and I don't know, if I said something about you that was true or not true, it would color that person's experience of you. So it can work both ways. I mean, there's certain, like, unless we really think Michael wears a blue vest, has blonde hair, and looks just like Renaissance people would think him to, we have to accept that there's a certain cultural overlay on these things.
It's sounding a lot like, in psychology we call it the priming effect, where you introduce that little bit of information before the situation, and then you have a sometimes huge effect on the situation itself.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
And of course, the difficulty, so you have a background in psychology. So I've often pointed out that we've never had pure perception of an experience. We always project onto the experience. The moment it's over, our memory of that experience is colored deeply. And so you can, and of course you would know better than I, the experiments that have done to just put this on display, right?
Oh yeah, a ridiculous number of things have made us just question reality, and the scientists love to hide it. But
so we kind of have this idea about the solid world we live in, right? And yet, when people communicate with God, spirits, and beings that are by definition more subtle, they go for the opposite. They seek for, well, was it this or was it not? Like a binary. As what I am perceiving my fantasy, or is it 100% what the spirit said, and you can take that to the bank? And the reality is, it's almost never one or the other. I mean, sometimes it's pure fantasy, I suppose, if someone isn't really doing much work at all. But generally what happens is, even somebody just doing a prayer or a light amount of work or turning their mind will gain some kind of resonance, some kind of spark. And then maybe that becomes, maybe the whole rest of it is a chain of mental events sparked by that. But that's something, isn't it? Right? Like, if you get something useful and actionable out of that, even if 99% of what you got was just the workings of your own mind, with 1% of like, hey, here's a spark from my divine flame, that's really something quite worthwhile. It's all about, and similarly the other way around, you could have something that's, you've got 90% just an overwhelming experience of a spirit appearing before you, and
Mm-hmm.
you're sure that like nothing like this has ever happened. It's just so real. You have to believe like that is one of the clearest perceptions you've ever had. And then the information winds up not really being useful or actionable or meaningful. So what's better, right? Like in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that that second one would be more problematic because now you have something that has shown you that reality is not what you think it is, but are you ill-equipped to put to use what was given you, or did you not understand, or was somebody just messing with you, or
Well,
something
all
to
of
that
the
effect?
above.
Yeah.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
know, I once wrote something like a, like a 20,000 word chapbook of like information and prophecies received
Mhm.
during a series of Enochian workings, and the angels, I'll use in quotes because they're Enochian spirits. They were just really strongly encouraging, like, publish this, get it out there, it's important. And it was actually their insistence that made me sit there and go, well, okay, is it? Like, and I'm playing out in my head, I'm like, okay, it's interesting, but is this really going to be useful? Like, if all of this is true, how does it help?
Yeah.
And if none of this is true, there could be harm. So I threw it out. I tossed it all. I
Yeah.
said to the spirits, I'm like, well, that was a whole lot of work for a whole lot of nothing. And I'm not doing it. And thank God, because none of the things that they were insisting came true came to pass.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, I have not practiced Enochian anything myself, but I do know how John Dee's life tended to fall apart once he started listening a little too closely. So, yeah, I
Right.
think there's a
And then,
very
of course, you
powerful lesson
have
there.
the lens that it comes through as far as a seer, too. So,
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
how much was a spirit and how much was Edward Kelly just like trying to get into Jane's pants?
Yeah, just charming people in our our little historical gems. One interesting thing that will happen, although my degree, my undergrad degree anyway, is in psychology, I'm a practicing hypnotist instead of a psychotherapist. And that gives me this interesting luxury where people will have numinous phenomenon and they don't want to talk to somebody who will just give them drugs. And
Right.
since I can't do that, I tend to get more of that than others. And one of the things that gets really interesting is I will occasionally get a phone call from a friend or sometimes a stranger who finds me on the internet. And they'll lay out this entire story. And it's very obvious from this point of view that it's a synchronicity storm. Like they tapped on someone's door, someone came up and gave them a little bit of a thump on the third eye or what have you. And they end up just having an avalanche of phenomenon happening. Now, you had mentioned resonance a little while ago, and I'm wondering, is a synchronicity storm, that unyielding pattern of, hey, look at this, hey, look at this, hey, look at this, and resonance as you're presenting in the book, is that the same thing, or are there key differences?
So the synchronicity storm certainly can be triggered by resonance.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that is the result of resonance. It's one of the ways that resonance can result. And yeah, and the fact that it then, again, it's kind of like the perception projection thing.
Mm-hmm.
You have that resonance, and then maybe that spawns some things that really were meant to be communicated by that being, and some things that weren't. And so it has to all be parsed out, just like if it was a person, right? Just like if a person said something that got me thinking about something, and just sort of like, I gotta consider this, and then it gets me thinking, and then all of a sudden something comes of it. It's not very different. In the book, Of course, I'm writing to witches and magicians and sorcerers. So in the book, I specifically talk about resonance because I want people to understand that not every interaction with a spirit for magic purposes, for a spell, needs to be summoning the spirit and demanding it do something. There are plenty of spells that are one-way communications, right?
Yeah.
And so we don't need to hear back. We just need resonance, right? So we can build resonance with a spirit over a long-term period, and then gain access to, for lack of a better word, its machinery, its tools, its retinue of its spirits and powers, and then we become a representative of it, right?
Yeah.
In the way, it's not an employee relationship, but you could think of it similar to the way that, like, the local barista probably never met Jeff Bezos. Or or the local, Amazon delivery guy. He probably never met Jeff Bezos, and yet he's acting on that behalf, right? Yeah. So it's a little more. It's not an employee relationship, but over the long term, you can resonate so strongly with a power, one of these vast powers, like a god or a series. Pantheon of gods and so on, that you get to exercise some of that power and authority. And then there are certain cases where you're doing a spell like a sympathetic magic spell, right?
Yeah.
Candle, a poppet, you're burning something, tying something, separating something, bathing something, whatever it is. And you invoke that power through prayer or invocation, and it witnesses that in whatever capacity, or the resonance links to that act in whatever capacity. And so the resonance is there. And this is true even of demons. So in the, there's a Venetian workbook that utilizes a lot of the spirits from the Grimoire Verum. But there are sympathetic magic spells in there that don't require you to have had a full evocation with the demon. At least not at the time of that spell. It might be helpful, or in some cases even necessary, to have had that in the past so that you could establish something. So it all gets very complicated. And that's the way it should be. Right? Like when people look at their models of spirits and how things work, and they're like, well, I think it's this. And it almost inevitably, it's like when you look at how ordinary life works, their model for how this works is less complex.
Yes.
And whereas by definition, because these are subtle beings, it should be more complex.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I certainly wouldn't want to operate in any type of world where anybody can simply say some words and get whatever they want in the world. There has to be that type of layered complexity or development of resonance. And I think I really like that term. I might roll with that a bit in my personal life, if you don't mind.
No, please. That's why I write the books.
Yeah, definitely.
For people to use it.
I do remember reading a long time ago, there was an account from, of all people, an anthropologist who was studying Siberian shamanism. And one of the shamans that they were interviewing was saying something very similar in that their work brought attendant spirits to them. But the biggest pain in his rear end was if he would say something casually, these spirits didn't have the ability to know that he was joking. So they would go and do things that he would say casually, and he wouldn't even really intend for something to actually happen. Now, there weren't any horror stories attached to it, of course, but it was just kind of like, oh, hey, I just mentioned needing this, and here it is. But it
That
would.
can definitely happen. Yeah,
Okay.
that's happened to me as well. And so something that I try to do is set up protocols so that it's like,
Mhm.
look, if this certainly for those big spirits, those vast spirits, they're not just going to suddenly act, although a lot of people just seem to think like the gods have nothing to do but micromanage their lives. But um it's a, how to say this, um if you work with a lot of local spirits,
Mhm.
you might find this the case. And so it's good to occasionally say, listen, only when I'm acting this way or during these ceremonies should you act on, what I say. Boundaries are good, just like with people.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's I run into more than one baby witch who still believes spirits cannot lie or something to that
Yeah.
effect. And it's like, no, 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 no. Who told you that? Was it a spirit?
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, those boundaries. We focus so much on setting boundaries with corporeal people. But we never really understand the human capacity to, access our own power and say, yes, I will do this. No, I will not do that, and set those boundaries like that. So important.
Honestly, the could have easily subtitled the book just like with people, because it's like it's a theme throughout the book, that it's like, look, just like with people, it works this way. Like, just like with people, try this. An example I recently wrote about on my blog is I just kind of wrote how people should just evaluate, instead of worrying about whether the spirit is really the spirit or your mind, or whether the spirit is telling the truth or not. You should evaluate how you evaluate all other information, right?
Mm.
Is it useful? Is it actionable? Does it make sense? And so on. And then so Yvonne Chareau is a great author and a professor at Swarthmore. She pointed out, like, hey, we've got methods in African traditional religions to divine whether a spirit is telling the truth, or to force a spirit to tell the truth.
Mhm.
And I said, yeah, those exist in the grimoire tradition as well. Names of God, you'll do this, and they exist in Buddhism, and they exist pretty much everywhere. And I don't trust them. It's one of the few occasions where
Mm.
I'm like, yes, this is the tradition, and it's actually a worldwide tradition. Like, everyone agrees this is, something that can be done, and I'm like, and I don't do it.
Yeah.
And the reason I don't do it is exactly what you said. Like, did a spirit tell you that it couldn't lie?
Yeah.
The most dangerous position to be in is to think that you have bound a spirit by force, but it not, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I was speaking with a friend of mine who he did Enochian evocations, but he really went for the, torture and antagonize the spirit, and from within the boundaries of his little sacred space and all. And I asked him, I'm like, well, what happens if you banish and it doesn't walk away, but you're convinced it has? It's like, oh, well, I have this amulet to protect me, so I can step past my boundaries. And I'm like, well, do you take it off when you shower? And he was like, oh, geez, I didn't. Like, how could you not think of these things? But those critical understandings, I think, are one of those very big progressive steps you have to go through in any branch of occultism to start to accrue true, I don't know if gnosis would be the right word, but a true understanding or power before you can really start getting into some dangerous stuff a little more safely.
Yeah, yeah. And and that's the thing. It's understanding the role of protections, understanding when to use them and when not to use them, and having a plan for when things do go wrong. But people seek a kind of certainty that doesn't exist with physical life, and they want it with magic. But again, it's more complex, it's more subtle, so it's by definition less certain. And it's the kind of thing people don't want to hear, but that's the way it is, yeah.
I mean, as humans, we want that guarantee that we'll always be safe and always be loved, and et cetera, but the amount of work that has to go into that type of guarantee is pretty antithetical to a lot of people's chosen lifestyles.
And I mean, it doesn't work. Like right now, I can get into my car, and even if I can install like a roll cage in the car, like, for stock car races, and a 5-point harness, and wear a helmet, like I'm just ready for a crash. And I then drive perfectly according to the rules. And I am perfectly aware in every possible situation that I could be aware. I could still die in a car crash. Just a truck could come barreling around the corner and take me out. And that's the reality, right? I once talked with someone in the military who was involved in security, and they just said outright, there's no such thing as 100% security. Like when it comes to defending an embassy or a base against an attacker who's like a suicide bomber, he goes, there are things you can do to mitigate it, but you can never say we're 100% safe here, right? It doesn't exist, but people really want it to when it comes to magic. And it just goes to show that some people get into magic because they want kind of a more comfortable fantasy life than real life. That sometimes magic is an escapism.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And at least in my experience, I've seen so many people get themselves into a lot of trouble trying to be that person, trying to, be the sorcerer or what have you, or just trying to feel secure in unsafe situations, but they don't really get their groundwork in their life set. And that's what I love about your strategic sorcery approaches and in fact, when I first wanted to take the Hecate 1 course, but I had asked about the expense and et cetera, and you actually encouraged me to wait because I was short on cash at that time. So I waited for that next cycle. Yeah, your approach of getting things down to where you were bare minimums, that almost like Maslow's pyramid, is so fundamentally beneficial to the practice of magic. Actually, I have not seen anything that does it in quite the same way that you do. So definitely appreciate that approach for sure.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And yeah, it's I try, for those listening, I've got some very intense classes that require a lot of work from me, and they're priced accordingly. But I also have courses that are, half that, and then a year-long course that's just emailed that's like $150, and then I've got the books and I've got free the blog. So I have something at every price point. And one of the things that that was happening is people were writing me like, I'm absolutely broke. But I'm gonna somehow beg, borrow, or steal to take this Hecate course. And I would just be like, please don't. no, don't do that. And then they'd be like, well, where, I need something to get my finances set. So I created a free class. It's on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
It's like 2 hours long. It's called Strategic Sorcery for the Financially Stuck.
Yeah, that is a hell
because
of a video.
I rate 4 stages of like financial life. And the first one that people are sometimes in is stuck. And so in the class, there's nothing that costs more than $20. Even mentioned in the class. And everything that I have to say about getting unstuck is sort of right there. There's nothing in the expensive course that is like, you need this to fix your life. Like, that's not it at all. So thank you for mentioning that. And I'm glad that it worked out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, once I have started solidifying the approaches in the Sorcery of Hecate courses, my life has literally, just looking at it from the psychic and psychophysiological state, it literally has that all the doors are now opening feel that goes on. So yeah, it's pretty amazing. I will also, for anyone listening, be dropping a full review on all 3 levels of Jason's Sorcery of Hecate courses. So keep an eye out for that, because spoiler alert, they're amazing. So there's that. One question I did want to come back to consorting the spirits, though, Jason. I'm trying to remember. It may have been an interview with Judica Illis with, it might have been Gordon White that was talking to her, but she had mentioned, we never really know what we look like to them.
So true.
Is there, have you gleaned any information on that, how they perceive us? I've always been super curious about that.
So I am only concerned with, so again, we have to kind of, I have to blow the question up,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Because there's no them, right? Like, how we look to one category of being will be different than how we look to another category of being.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can think about how different people can see things differently, just based upon icons and whatnot, then my goodness, how different could things be? But it also gets down to what I call head questions.
Mm-hmm.
How, like, the facts about how things are versus what meaning we can find from them, or what usefulness we can find from them. And I tend to avoid all head questions of how are these things, what are the mechanics of it, how does it look, where is it located, and like, because I just think magic and religion and spirituality is bad at answering those questions. I mean, and ultimately, even if it's a good answer, it winds up being something that's unverifiable in any kind of scientific sense. So I don't really care. Like, if Metatron comes down, appears before me in like looking as real as my sofa, and then grabs a whiteboard and lays out like a schematic of how we look to angels and how the heavens work and so on, I'll kind of look and I'll be like, okay, how does this affect how I do magic? How does this affect how we live life? How does this affect how we feel about ourselves or frame reality? And if I can't get something from that that's either useful or meaningful, then if it's just like, well, no, this is all just the physics of how the world works, then I'll be like, yeah, unless you're giving a proof to a physicist, I really could give 2 craps, right? You sold this to the wrong person. Because it's not useful, it's not meaningful in that way. So why do I care? So how we look to the spirits, I don't care about. Whether the spirits can see us or whether we're visible to them, I do care about. So people are always worried about seeing spirits. They want to increase their ability to see spirits.
Mm-hmm.
But they do very little to increase their ability to be seen by spirits. And this is where energy work can come in, like inner fire work can come in, spiritual authority comes in. The kind of work that we do in the Sorcery of Hecate, where there's a daily practice where you are resonating not only with Hecate, but in a specific form and in a very mechanical way. And constantly exposing yourself and integrating your body with these powers, it boosts your visibility to these spirits. So, I mean, let's put it this way. Again, with like, when we consider how different spirits are, how can we really even worry about what they look like when we can't even really imagine what a mantis shrimp, what can see? Like, we have 3 cones in our eyes that create all the colors we see. Mantis shrimp have 16 eye cones, producing billions of colors that we can't even conceptualize.
Mm-hmm.
So why do we think that, like, we would even be able to really know how the spirits perceive us?
Yeah.
Or like in a mechanical way, in the way that's like, hey, can you see me? Can you hear me? That's useful. That's important. But like, when it gets to like, what do we look like to them?
Mm-hmm.
I don't care about the question, because it's not answerable in any way that is satisfactory to me.
Gotcha.
In a way that would be useful or meaningful. So it doesn't really matter to me. And that one, that simple adjustment of like, what, we're not going to do head questions. It blows so much nonsense out of the water. And if we could do this with other things, like if we could have done this with philosophy,
oh geez, yeah,
we would be so much more advanced than we are, right? Like, yeah. I mean, students sometimes will get frustrated when I bring up the head, heart, hand, because they want, well, is Hecate the same being as Kali? I don't know why everybody relates her to Kali, but this is like, is she the same or is she not the same? What is the nature of their relationship, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm always like, this doesn't really matter. Like, this isn't, you're looking to find out how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, and it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. Yeah. But if we could have said that about Aristotle and Plato, like head, heart, and hand is there useful stuff in Aristotle and Plato? My God, yes.
Absolutely, yeah.
Is there meaningful stuff that helps us frame the way we think of reality? Of course, chock full of it. Now, how about facts of cosmology and how the world works? Almost nothing is correct. Like, almost none of it is winds up being correct. And so we have years and years and years of tossing out any data that shows, I mean, people knew that the planets moved in ellipses or suspected ellipses in ancient Greece, but they couldn't say it because ellipses aren't perfect circles. And Plato says, so it's, I'm really, really passionate about having magicians drop the head questions. And so the long answer to, well, it wasn't a simple question, but it was in my mind an unanswerable question.
Yeah, I had full disclosure, I had actually read your blog the other day on the head, heart, hand post, and I thought to myself, I'm like, what head question, what innocuous head question can I think of? And there we go.
Clever interviewer.
So for the newbies to the field, the baby witches and such, and I love that term. I don't mean it offensively. If anyone out there wants to get hyphy, leave a comment. Boost my algorithm. What in this book would be of most benefit, and what would possibly be most dangerous to an inexperienced reader?
Ooh. So, the inexperienced reader will get a lot out of the framework in the early chapters of what spirits are and how they work. And again, I try my very best to stick to heart and hand and only theorize as far as the head questions go, as much as is needed to help people with things that are meaningful and useful. But so that would be good. The section on spirit skills will be very useful. The section on getting to know local beings will also be very useful, but that's also where the danger starts. So, and then from there on of it, honestly, it's all, you might do a friendly conjuration and it might go swimmingly well, or it might go bad. You might do a forceful conjuration where you're doing that, you get down here in the name of, and I demand, and blah, blah, blah. And it might go swimmingly well. There might be there are spirits who will only respond that way and respect that show of force. And then there are other spirits who will rebel and you'll have a fight on your hands. So what I would say is, once you start contacting spirits, grab protection and reversal magic first.
Definitely.
Because I did not include a chapter on protection in the book. And that was deliberate. I have a section on fear and assessing fear and assessing risk and so on, but I did not want to get into, and here's everything you need to know about protection, because a chapter doesn't cut it when dealing with spirits. And I mean, a chapter doesn't even bring you to basic competency when it comes to protection involving spirits.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's an amazing book, and I definitely recommend anyone who hears this to actually, if you have not got a copy, go out and pick that up.
Now that said, if somebody out there is a reasonably experienced person and they've got their protection knowledge in place, just not through protection and reversal magic, totally fine. I'm not saying that my book, and none of my books are the only way to something, or even the best empirical way to something. So, there are plenty of ways that people can learn protection magic. Just, if you want to do, like, if you need something on protection magic, I think my book is still one of the best.
Oh yeah, I would absolutely concur with that. Definitely some good, amazing stuff in there. And I do remember, if the shit ever completely hits the fan, I don't know if you still have it, but you had a brief exorcism course as well. Was that something you still offer?
It's up there for sale. It's an Arcane Audio. It's on my website. And the thing is, it's so funny because I've taught about curses openly, right? Like, just fun. Like, this is how you curse, this is how you jinx, this is how you do all this kind of stuff. And I was really gung shy about talking about exorcism, even in protection and reversal magic. The book as it stands now does not contain an exorcism. It has a chapter on it that describes the general way it should go, but it doesn't contain a script. There is a new version coming out soon that will have a script, but it also explains why I am so gun shy about people setting themselves up as exorcists. There has been an enormous amount of abuse and even death associated with exorcisms that are carried out poorly, and that are carried out by the inept. And so, like, if you personally, not you, Nicholas, but you, the listener, run into a situation where you need to escalate above the protection and reversal and into binding, which is what an exorcism is, then that's fine. There's plenty of material out there. I've got the exorcism class. It's what you do when the shit hits the fan. It's a struggle. It's a fight. If there's no pushback, then you didn't need an exorcism. But when people, the reason that I didn't put it out is because throughout the years of teaching, especially the Black School of St. Cyprian, many people were like, I want exorcisms so that I can go and exorcise people. And the people that were really pushy about it were the people that I most would never, ever want to see doing that. Because you're talking about people who are at their most vulnerable, right? Like, people, if you're treating patients, not yourself, you're treating people who are at their most vulnerable. You're treating people where at best you're in the gray space between mental disorder and psychic attack. And it is a gray space, because the symptoms of mental disorder can be caused by spiritual attack, but mental disorders can also cause people to think that they're under spiritual attack when in fact they're not. So you're in a gray area. There should be a professional there. You should have pastoral training. Like, when you go and you get like an Orthodox priest, or Catholics need bishop's approval and things, you're getting somebody who's been to seminary. Yeah. Like, they've got certifications for dealing with people. And it's great if magicians and witches have that, or they work with people who are professionals in the field, then great. But otherwise, it gets into some really sticky territory. So I do have a class in exorcism, and there will be an exorcism script in the new edition of Protection and Reversal Magic, but go lightly, especially if you're doing it for somebody else, and go lightly if you're asking someone else to do it for you.
Yeah, definitely. Just coming from the very limited and Midwestern Christian background I grew up in, there are just far too many occasions of full-grown men just manhandling women and children and commanding spirits to come out of them, and it becomes this whole mishmash. There's never really a spirit involved other than the crazy ones that are manhandling each other. But as a psychological phenomenon as well, it just feeds into this weird mass delusion that gets very, very dangerous.
Yep. And the thing is, looking at evangelicals and small churches, storefront churches, but also people operating out of mega churches.
Oh yeah.
teen exorcists and things like this, these kinds of things. You don't have to look hard to find cases of abuse and death.
Yeah.
But the pagan occult community, especially as it grows larger, and it's growing very large.
Oh yeah.
The increase in just the sales of books is absolutely, grabbing attention. Which is why like Insider Magazine is reporting on witch talk, and stuff like that. Like it's really like, as it grows, the more you will see this. And so everything that we love about it, as far as it's unregulated and it's the Wild West and there's no central authority, those are good in general, especially when the central authority is often acting maliciously or incompetently. But that doesn't mean that the individuals within the community aren't doing the same. And I've seen too much to just be like, probably okay.
I'm just going to set this down and walk away. It's very interesting. And I think on the last thing I wanted to ask before I let you go, just to respect your time, is the one understanding that I think is so crucial for people new to the field to understand is, realistically, there's not a whole lot of separation. We tend to think of spirit world and then this world, but there is such a powerful intermingling. And that was made so clear to me with a technique out of, I believe it was Sorcerer's Secrets, perceiving the world in front of you in that two-dimensional sense and peeling something back to look. I did that technique on the gambling floor in a casino in Las Vegas. And the only thing I saw was an incredibly observant eye. Just even as I started to peel it back, there was just something there looking back at me. It was one of those cartoon moments where you just gently try and put the wallpaper back up on the wall and try and smush it back into place and walk away.
Wow.
But how do you best explain to people new to the field how there's that distinction between spirit world and human or mortal world, for lack of a better term?
So it really depends on how deep we want to go. So let's take 3 different examples, none of which are comprehensive, or they're models in the sense that they're useful, not in the sense that they're true, factually true. They're true as far as giving meaning, right? So let's just use 3 models. So I think that there's nothing wrong with the our world, other world model, because it speaks to a pretty obvious binary of experience, that there's stuff that we can see physically, and then there's stuff we can't see physically. And even there's stuff in between, but there's some stuff like radio waves and such that we can build physical things to sense and pick up on. But then there are things that we haven't been able to do that with yet, if we ever can. So in that sense, the physical world, spirit world model is perfectly adequate. But just remember that they are linked, right? Then we can also take a look at a 3-world model. And this is kind of what I used in the Sorcerer's Secrets, where we've got the physical world, and then we've got the astral world, or the world of spirits and energy and very not intangible, although it's obviously not physically tangible, but what's the word I'm looking for? Malleable, very, very malleable, very, things can move and shift and they're not as hard physically as they are here. And then there's the world that we can either call the mentor world or the Empyrean world. It tends to be beyond subject-object space. It tends to be, we can discuss mind at this level. We can discuss deity at this level. We can discuss, exalted mystic states that change or speak to the nature of perception than what is perceived, right? So sometimes people will say they have a mystic experience, and then they'll go and they'll describe they saw God, God came down, took their hand, showed them a land, and whatever it is. It's still just, that's astral, right? Like whether it's God or not, there was you were there was an object, it was there, it's like a dream, right? But then there are also experiences people have that shake the nature of perception, and those things tend to be that Empyrean level, that mental level. So that's a 3-world model, but again, fake. It's just there for use because this is a slide. So then we can get into my 7-world model that I use in the Level Up course, where now we have the physical, then we have the etheric, which is between the astral and the physical. This is where acupuncture comes in, and yoga comes in, and qigong comes in, right? We're manipulating energies, but we're not just doing it through will. We have to use our breath and musculature or heat and needles and things, right? So it's between the physical and the astral. And then we've got the astral, and then we've got what I call symbol space, or the psychonoetic level, where it's between the astral and the mental. And then you've got the mental, and then above that you've got the causal level, where just even perception originates. So you've got all these different, like that's a 7-world model, but also not empirically, not factually true. It's a sliding scale. There are things that defy this or that. And when we try to nail it down, instead of saying, this is useful, if we try to say this is exactly how it is, we get screwed up. It's kind of like I can have a map of Vermont that shows the elevation of mountains, or I can have a road map or any other kind of map, or a map of the town barriers, but none of them are actually what it is, right? Like there's always some aspects missing. So I guess it goes back to that old nugget: the map is not the terrain, and people need to keep it in mind.
Absolutely. And incredibly well put too. I've never really looked at a 7-layer. I think I just didn't want to go and count 7 different layers, but that actually lines so many different things up as well. So
did I get to 7? Physical, etheric, astral, psychonoetic, mental, causal, and then I think I put like a perfection level up there as sort of like the beyondness.
All right, very cool. Beg your pardon, a little bit of a blowing ragweed in Texas here, so my allergies just caught up with me today.
Yeah, my allergies were hitting me last week, and then we got 6 inches of snow.
Oh, I saw that on your Facebook feed. Yeah,
2 days ago. Jeez. And so the allergies are, held off for a little while.
Excellent. Yeah, on the ever-changing nature, when you think you have something nailed down, and that's definitely something that has caught up with me in spades in the Hecate courses as well. But I'm starting to suspect there may be some very attenuated spirit out there that listens for the invocation mantra of this is how it is. And that's how you summon this little goblin who will then show up and then just change everything for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. But unlikely, but possible. Who knows? All right, Jason. So how can people find you and the amazing things that you do so we can get more people in touch with your teachings?
Don't find me. I'm hidden. No, I'm kidding. Strategicsorcery.net.
.net.
That's my website. That is you're gonna find my blog. You're gonna find the Monday Magic newsletter. You're gonna find all the courses and everything that I offer. And so whether you follow the blog or the newsletter or both, or you jump and find me on the socials, I'm active on Facebook, although my plan is to be a little less active on Facebook going forward. I am getting more active on Insta. I'm not at all on TikTok, and my only presence on Twitter is that it seems to simulcast what I put on Facebook. So at some point in the past, I made some kind of link between the two accounts. And because somebody's like, just on your Twitter, you said, and I'm like, dude, I don't have Twitter. And they're like, yeah, you do. And then I went to Twitter and I was like, oh, look at that. I've been posting all along. But I don't find it. If somebody wants to get a hold of me, strategicsorcery@gmail is the best way to do it. And really kind of the only way to do it. And unfortunately, even there, if it's an open-ended question and you're not in a course, I probably can't answer anymore. I've reached that annoying level of being known, which is, I'm not bragging. It's something that I actually, a lot of my Tibetan teachers bemoaned this, that they used to be able to like have more one-on-one time with students and things like this. And they used to have more time to, bullshit about whatnot. And then now they can't. So, and when I was young and I wanted their attention, it was really frustrating. And I was just like, this sucks. And now it's happening to me.
That's just the penalty of success.
Yeah, I guess I'll try not to make it a humble brag or something, but yeah, I only mention it because sometimes people do get upset, like if they can't get a hold of me, because the expectation now is that you can get a hold of any author or any person you want, and they should be answering you, soon.
Just like when you try and invoke something and you don't get the response you want.
Right. And then people would, a lot of people had said, well, Jason, you should just get an assistant. And I'm like, I should get an assistant to answer like random emails not related to my courses, or like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not getting an assistant just to, because then you wind up having to train an assistant and monitor them, and it winds up just being just as much of a time suck. So
you have a whole
I took a page out of Neil
thing
Stephenson's books and just said, I can't, by all means write me, but I can't guarantee a response.
Gotcha. All right. Well, gonna say every conversation that I have, I find the best ones are the ones where I walk away with a mountain of more questions and knowledge than I started with. And this is definitely not an exception to that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say thank you very much, Jason. It has been amazing actually talking to you instead of talking back to the recording lessons that I get every week from you. And thank you very much. Is there anything you want to say before I go ahead and in the interview here?
Yeah, just grab Consorting with Spirits, and if you like it, give it a review. Unfortunately, the world is run by algorithms now, and so the review will really help boost the algorithm. I hate living that way, but that's the way it is. If you like it, of course. If you don't like it, then just keep that crap to yourself.
Yeah, go to someone else's page.
I'm kidding, of course. You give me whatever kind of honest review you want. That's all I ever ask for people.
Amazing. Well, thanks very much, Jason. I'm going to go ahead and let you get on with your day, and I appreciate you. And
Thank you,
everyone
sir.
out there, yeah, absolutely. Everyone out there listening, this is Jason Miller. Do check out his stuff. I can say completely without reservation, everything that he has taught is amazing and worth every bit of investment you can muster. So enjoy it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, that was Jason Miller, and a wonderful interview to start the Mind Magic Mayhem podcast off with. I want to say a special thank you to Jason for taking an hour out of your life to spend with me. Immensely appreciated, and gratitude falls upon you in uncountable amount. I hope the karmic rewards are immense for you. Now, to the audience at large, I strongly recommend Jason's material. I have been in this game for a couple of decades, and I can safely say that there are thousands of authors out there. Few of them are as well informed as Jason. So if you are new to the art magical of any variety, check his stuff out. I think you're going to find a lot of stuff that's going to be of great use and benefit to you. I want to say thank you to the listeners coming in, spending an hour of your time with me. I am going to be having some pretty amazing guests coming up soon. So definitely hit like, hit subscribe, or just check in every now and then and see what we have. Thanks for your time, guys. I'll see you next time.